Welcome, everybody. We just wanted to make a couple sort of announcements, one of which is the session is going to be about 3 hours long, more or less, probably a little bit less. We don't have a designated break, so if you need to step away, just feel free to do and come in and out as you please. And we would also like you to put your phones on silent if you can, or if you haven't done that yet, that would be really nice.
And I would add that along the lines of, this kind of porousness of the space, if between different moments you want to maybe move around in the room as well, right? Invite you to feel free to do that as well.
Yeah, so there will be a little bit of mobility throughout the session, so you also feel free to shift positions if you like at some point. So, yes.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Welcome. Hi, Tavi.
Hi. Hi, Murat.
So I'm so excited that we are finally here together after working for 2.5 years online.
Yes, it's definitely kind of breathtaking, incredible, sort of trying to find, ground oneself again after, because it's also like the thing about, I think we've all, gotten so used to seeing each other on screens at this point that there's, on one hand, a kind of seamlessness, to just, oh yeah, of course, I just saw you like a few days ago. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, to be in the same space with you is...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I had contacted Tavi about 2.5 years ago and invited him to join me in developing the session. At the time when I contacted you, I had absolutely no knowledge about who you were. Just based on your name, I couldn't make up anything about your ethnicity, your background, where you were living, your gender, anything. So it was literally just based on that text that you had written. It was a published text on the notion of iridescence that you were somehow reconfiguring, and I felt instantly connected to that text in the sense that you were using the notion of iridescence, and iridescence as sort of a phenomenon that is a kind of shimmering presence on a surface, as sort of a lens and a prism, and also a device in some way to think through a lot of different things, one of which is intimacy. And another notion is the notion of camouflage, and that is one that I have been working with and for these past years. And it was the first time that I had encountered a sort of piece of writing that was also thinking through these phenomena and sort of, I guess, like in different ways as they are normally understood, kind of reconfiguring them towards something else, towards maybe a practice, but at the same time, the only one that I had encountered that was really similar to the ways that I was sort of trying to reconfigure. So that was really kind of the starting point of our relationship that has now evolved over the past 2.5 years.
Yeah, actually, it's funny that we start out with this kind of moment of mutually like, oh wow, we're like really in the same physical space, because that kind of reminds me of actually the sort of the thought and the process and everything that went into how I ended up, so to speak, thinking about camouflage and iridescence, right? And that specifically being kind of what I in my notes call a kind of like simultaneity of a multiplicity of realities or multiple realities kind of coexisting. And that's, and in that kind of context, camouflage kind of appeared as a sort of like very emblematic of that. I mean, there's like a kind of maybe, like a simplistic example, but like in the case of like mimetic camouflage, right? It's like if you're seen, maybe you don't live, and if it works, if it doesn't work, maybe you don't live. But if it works, mm-hmm. maybe you do that kind of thing. I mean, that's maybe one kind of oversimplified, sketch of what it means by the simultaneity of multiple realities, but it was really pushing that notion of it's not just a visual trick or a visual illusion, right? There's something more at stake than that, and it was through kind of thinking through that stuff that I also realized I had this kind of lay fascination with iridescence, and I came across that in fact iridescence can also be a form of camouflage. So not like the mimetic kind, but maybe like a more dazzling, or as you say, this shimmering kind of thing. And I know you and I have been talking about this, for a really long time, and also, we're already thinking about it together in similar ways, as you say. But maybe it's worthwhile to just really quickly, since we're sharing the physical space with all of you right now, just really quickly to offer a quick definition of at least how I, and I think we, by extension, are
Can I just interject?
Yeah, sure.
Just 1 second there, because maybe the way that I had actually never really thought about the notion of iridescence, or I've never really come across. Well, I mean, in that sort of context of writing, and somehow like. Maybe just before you go into your definition, the thing that I had picked up from it that I felt was really interesting was that you had described that phenomenon of iridescence as something that only exists insofar as it is seen. For example, if a multiplicity of surfaces are corresponding to one another, like on the surface of the water, it is therefore like something that exists in interplay and in correspondence and in interaction, and can only be sort of existing, or exists only insofar as it is seen from a specific perspective or an angle of the viewer, rather than something that you can actually like physically hold on to and grasp, and it's constantly changing. And I felt that was really interesting. I mean, to me also to use that, or not to use that, but to think that sort of further, also in the context of camouflage, when sort of a different sort of reality is opened up, like through an instance of sort of chromatic change or textural change. That it's not so much that, as you say, that something is being tricked per se, but it's also that another sort of level of reality is opened up within sort of that corporeal reality that I think you were sort of tackling also with in your text. In terms, I think you were talking about the virtual in that sense, like virtual reality, not in the sense of the technological sense of the word, but maybe in a more sort of embodied sense.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. It's like there's something. It's trying to really push at. It's not merely a visual trick, but there's something that opens up or becomes possible in a palpable sense, right? And so I think that's where like the body comes in for sure. And I mean, there's already existing notions of kind of like a third space or some other space, but something is happening. And I know because you're working on camouflage so closely, but in that moment of camouflage, it's like truly multiple realities are sort of interweaving, or like chiasmically just like intertwining with each other, something like this. But before further ado, I should offer that quick definition, because it is touching on already, or like connected to your sketches for sure. So like iridescence, most obviously, or just in everyday, I think it's like it's experienced or perceived, understood as like a chromatic phenomenon, right? It's a very dazzling, resplendent kind of rainbow colors happening on an oil spill or whatever it might be. But it's in fact, there's no pigment to it, right? It's what's called a geometric or structural phenomenon. And as you say, it's precisely that the angle of view, the perspective of the viewer itself is sort of co-determining or co-creating or corresponding, right? And yes, it is just, so to speak, like a visual thing, but that's what I'm trying to push, right? Can we draw like an epistemology out of it, or something like this? And I feel like that's really close to where you're working as well, right?
Yeah, and I think I picked up that a term that you were using, which was architectonics, thinking through the different kinds of architectures that are opened up in iridescence, and also thinking that through in terms of an architectonic of like intimacy, as you are developing it in your text. And I've been thinking camouflage, on the other hand, sort of through as a spatial act, and I've been doing that through a choreographic practice, particularly sort of working with movement and sort of sort of utilizing it also as a way to test and probe other kinds of body space relationships, and so what was also really interesting with that, I think, was I mean, besides the sort of commonalities that I found like in your thinking and your research, was that when we met was kind of almost like a blind date. Also, we realized that we have so many sort of personal commonalities, which is sort of both of us being queer, both of us having these itinerant subjectivities, coming kind of from like immigrant parents, growing up in sort of immigrant conditions in different countries, and then also having this German background, both speaking German, and sort of sharing these sort of like also sort of, let's say, backgrounds of kind of growing up in very underprivileged sort of circumstances, but then finding ourselves like in these more kind of different kinds of spaces that are often and just maybe again also with this idea of like being itinerant or not sort of maybe like feeling that one belongs so much to like some specific sort of local, I mean, let's say micro of identity, is that somehow that to me was really interesting, that we both really connected on that level, because on one hand, as like these let's say subjects sort of, let's say, marked by gender or like race or whatever, like we like it's sort of close to us to be kind of thinking about these things, but at the same time feeling a certain discontent with like the sort of very conservative kind of notion of identity politics and being not really and somehow it was just like having that sort of problematic relationship with that in like a lot of different ways, which is not maybe one to be resolved, but it was just interesting kind of in that light also that we are somehow drawn to these kinds of ideas and concepts in these similar ways, given the sort of personal experience that we both share.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that was actually after we had been working together for some time, that we had this sort of like light bulb go off, be like, wait a minute, it's all connected, right, in some ways. And in a way, like, it raises the stakes of, I think, the work that both of us individually and together we're trying to do around camouflage and iridescence. More concretely, what I mean is, as you say, like, as we got to know each other better, we really did realize, wow, like, I mean, on paper, so to speak, or whatever, we do have so many shared experiences, and, granted, different countries, different, specific contexts, but still, nevertheless, like, the subjective experience, right, of there's a lot in common, and I think along those lines, we also realized we shared something very, very particular with regard precisely to these conditions that we kind of find ourselves sort of naturally in, and the way that there's different discourse kind of being built around, as you say, like identity politics. Like even for me, I kind of hesitate almost sometimes to use that word because it's. I think the way that an example that I can give, or kind of a, what do you call it, like a brief soundbite about it is, it's like you make a work, and if there's even like a little whiff of like a queerness to it or a POC-ness to it, it's like it then suddenly gets only read as a queer work or a POC work, let's say. Or at least that's been my experience. And it's not to say that there isn't an importance to that. It's like that's the thing. There's like a kind of a double-edged to it, right? On the one hand, it's great that there's these spaces and contexts being generated that give space or shed light, on such works and such practices. But on the other hand, and I mean, this is maybe a too easy of a diagnosis or phrasing, but it's like there's this kind of immediate commodification, if you will, right? Like it's like, okay, let's just tag it right away as a queer work or a queer POC work, if you will. And I think that's where all of our different ideas were really coming together, and also showing how high or intense the stakes are, if you will, to our work on, on that inherently elusive thing, camouflage and/or iridescence. Because we're trying to, I think one of the things that we ended up talking a lot about was, what would be the conditions of possibility, so to speak, where maybe there can be a little bit of a pause, let's say, right, before it's immediately like labeled or commodified or whatever, right? And it seems as though the mechanics, and I dare to say maybe ontology or whatever, of camouflage and iridescence, as we both understand it, maybe beginning to offer some way for that to happen, right? If it's like this kind of, the idea being that perhaps we can think of identity or matter or these things through a kind of logic of iridescence, through a kind of accretion, if you will, of the shimmers and glints, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and accretion is interesting also in regards to thinking through sort of, or thinking camouflage through as sort of an act where one exceeds, the organism exceeds its self-boundary, it exceeds the boundary of the skin into the environment, and therefore also exceeds sort of questions around subjectivity in that sense, that's sort of exceeding into the space. And somehow when you mentioned, so earlier you said you either live or you die, thinking also camouflage as sort of a strategy in that sense, like you mentioned the sort of the natural order that we have been born in, like the conditions that we have found ourselves living. I mean, like on the personal scale, like through our sort of backgrounds. Perhaps I find interesting also thinking if camouflage in the animal and plant kingdoms, let's in the natural world, is a strategy for survival, or is often. Actually, it's not only that, so it is actually, scientifically also proven that it's not always sort of the main reason for organisms camouflaging, not always, but if it is a strategy, it's often one that is temporary, and it's not a permanent state, and it's one that is, it's temporary, and so for that, perhaps in relation to these questions around identity, and I'm thinking that if we could somehow think camouflage also as a sort of mechanism in which almost a second nature is created in nature. Like if, for example, that natural order that you mentioned is hostile and toxic, and sort of maybe a bit like perhaps like particularly towards certain given subjects, then that sort of like secondary nature, or maybe we could call it in a different way, could also be sort of a strategy for precisely kind of intervening in these kinds of spaces.
Yes, it's a thought formed and then it kind of evaporated. But the thing that I think I, and maybe by extension you, I think, trying to grasp at is this, again, like through that glinting or the accretion of shimmers or what have you, yeah, indeed, as you say, there's a kind of exceeding of what, like the received idea of edges of a self, right? And it's, and for me, this kind of ties back to my very, very earliest kind of encounter with this idea of what I'm calling the multiplicity of realities, which is how I kind of, what sort of made me realize I need to do art at all at that point. And so, and it's a really big idea for me, but in a sense of how, yeah, it's another way of how do we like kind of capture or recognize, right, that multiplicity. And it's through maybe recognizing also that there's this kind of inherent like porosity to our edges, right? And then, as I think that's sort of where we're going at. And it kind of reminds me of, a couple of things. One is, well, maybe I'll mention the one is, in my work I'm often thinking about, when you're a kid or a child, right? You're not yet a thing. You just are, right? And you're not yet what I'd call like ossified yet by ideology, right? And it's something like maybe that's a kind of space that I want to hold open. And I feel like also in our respective works we're kind of interested in holding open, right? Or like another way to put it is, when you first, this is maybe coming from me and my own working notes, but when you first wake up, you're sensing, but you don't maybe yet perceive or recognize what it is that your eyes just opened up, and there's a kind of breath or a moment or an interstice, right? And it's like these kinds of, I think, possibilities and spaces that I think are maybe shed light on a bit by the iridescence or the camouflage.
I remember you also mentioning the sort of space between perception and recognition, maybe that space in between. And maybe from there I would perhaps maybe shift just maybe from like this idea of edges to the title for our session. So the title of our session is Reversible Figures. And do you want to maybe just say a few words what reversible figures are? Yeah,
with pleasure. So maybe many of you may be familiar with, that, again, I feel like we're referencing so many visual tricks, but it's, that image that can be two things at once, depending on sort of how you look at it, right? So the couple famous ones being like the rabbit duck image, or the one that you mentioned me the other day, reminded me of the other day of, there's like a vase in the middle, and it's actually two persons' faces facing each other. And for us, that kind of emerged as this very totally makes sense kind of icon for our thinking, because it's that kind of vibrating, right, that we're interested in.
And then also on the other hand, those images that you sort of move, like through the movement, like the multiple images collide and collapse into one another. So, which is like the other kinds of reversible images. So that became a little bit also kind of a guiding principle for the choreography that we use to structure the session. So we've invited a number of co-respondents to be present with us today. And we have Georgia Sagri, who's sitting there, and Matthias Sperling, and also Starhawk, who is going to meet us via Zoom. And somehow this idea...
Also Soap Bubble.
And Soap Bubble, thank you. And sort of this kind of idea of like the reversible, especially the reversible figures of that back and forth thing, and kind of back and forth thing, and sort of almost sort of collapsing into one another. That's sort of was a bit of a guiding principle for the choreography that we...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's like we really saw what can happen when we take seriously the permeability of edges, right?
Yeah.
And, yeah. So thank you again for being with us. And
we have also one score that we wanted to share. So in addition to the idea of reversible figures, we used with one score by dance maker Deborah Hay. And
yeah, I can start us off. It's that what if shimmering was how we experience the passing of time, here and gone, here and gone, here and gone, with the emphasis on the here, in the here and gone.
And I just want to repeat that. What if shimmering is how you experience time passing, here and gone, here and gone, here and gone, with an emphasis on the here and the here and gone.
Can we now hand over to Soap Bubble?
Thank you. Could we please now hand over to Georgia Sagri?
When your own being goes out and meets the weight of the sea, the heaving of the quickening air, the wind, that is the dead reckoning, the beginning of orienting. The body lets go. It is floating. It's becoming the trace, the transcription of all the forces that whirl together into this one point, the deictic here, now. The air, heavy with moistures, heaves against the windows like I dampen your airways with my breath. It's unclear, when leaning, what part is on what sort of the window, or is it the body that's the sill? We are never open nor closed. We need to find our body's language. When I look into the oblivion at the shore at night, the unavailability of the horizon beckons me to seek it. The first thing that anchors my vision is, in fact, my body. We need to find our body's language. How did I get here? The degree zero of bodying. Try to be attentive to yourself. To me, don't be distracted by norms or habits. The secretion that is the self, it knew itself, what it was before there was even language. It recognized itself before there was structure, before there was culture and its manifold assemblages. It was the North Star, and it shed stardust with each breath. It was more vast than the universe and more true. We extend into our environments, and yet paradoxically are required to live this extension as interiority. What happens when you begin to experience me as an environment and a choreography of affordances unfolds, and I, chiasmically, thusly experience you? Water affords pouring because it is a fluid. It affords drinking and washing. What if we begin to think, I afford, you afford me? That I afford your interiority and you mine. We're constantly opening up that space, that interstice, you know, the one when you first wake, before perceiving, you are sensing things. You're sensing things, but not yet quite sure what exactly. We're stretching and holding open that interstice between perception and recognition. Where does one thing end and another begin? We are the pane of the window, its sill, vitreous bodies, translucent and endlessly superimposable, but there is no top nor bottom. There is no future nor past, just the thought. One of my favorite German words is Denkmal, which is a word for memorial. It's a composite word from denken, to think, and mal in the sense of mark or a stain. Stain begins to absorb the material spilled on. And we are trying to articulate something. The strong coastal winds make the trees bend almost horizontal. Begin to bend and try to match the angle of the trees. If my body moves like the tree bending in the wind, I will begin to know what the tree knows. What does my body know that I do not? The moment discourse ceases to follow the slope of self-interiorizing thought and returns thought to the outside, it becomes language about the invisible side of words. When you capitalize even common nouns, it makes them heavier. Celan once wrote, "Gib deinem Spruch auch den Sinn, gib ihm den Schatten." Give your utterance meaning, give it a shadow. To me, it sounds like give it substance, make it matter. The body is a most peculiar thing, for it is never quite reducible to being merely a thing. Nor does it ever quite manage to rise above the status of a thing, an object which somehow contains or coexists with an interiority. In this form, in which all my cells are visible all at once, in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams.
I would like to invite everybody in a moment to close your eyes. If you need to find a more comfortable position, feel free. If you already feel comfortable, just stay where you are, but you're welcome to lie on the floor or just remain as you are. Or if you need to leave the room, perhaps you could do that now. And just take a moment to find a comfortable position. And whenever you do, just close your eyes. And perhaps also just keep your eyes closed for the duration. So once you have your eyes closed, just notice how your body is in this moment, how it is feeling here in this moment. Perhaps you might feel heavy or light, or relaxed or tense. You might notice some sensations in your body, perhaps in certain body parts. Just begin to notice how you are feeling, how your body is feeling as you are sitting here or lying here or standing here. And just attend to you being present here in this room with your eyes closed, and just notice. And perhaps also notice your breathing. Perhaps just notice how your breath is. Is it shallow? Is it deep? And again, you also don't need to change it, just notice. And with that noticing, perhaps you can introduce a few intentional breaths in and out. And just keep your eyes closed for this moment. And as you keep your eyes closed, and as you are attuning to your body here, being present here in the space, perhaps you can allow yourself to sink into your body a little more. And perhaps with that sinking in, maybe bringing in some relaxation. Perhaps you might want to release some tension if there is any on your face. Could be your jaw, your eyes, your eyebrows, or your shoulders. Just allowing yourself to sink a little and relax a little bit into your body as you are sitting or standing or lying here. And just continue breathing. And then perhaps take some time to feel the connection of your body, or feel the connection between your body and your surrounding, perhaps the connection of your feet on the ground. Feeling that connection between the feet touching the ground, or the back of your body touching the back of the chair, or your bottom touching the chair, or the back of your body on the beanbags, whatever it is, just sort of tune into that meeting point, that connection between the surface of your body and the surface of the space or the object that is supporting you here. And just spend a moment feeling into that connection, feeling into that moment of touch between the surface of your body and the surface that is supporting your body. And just allow yourself to attend to that point of contact of these two surfaces touching one another. Your body and the floor, your body and the chair, your body and the cushion, your body and the wall. And as you are lying here or sitting here, while you keep your eyes closed, perhaps you might also want to widen your attention a little bit outside into the space. And just kind of notice some of these things that lie outside of your body. You might hear some shuffling sounds, maybe some ambient sounds of the lighting, or perhaps just feel into the atmosphere. Perhaps you feel some warmth or cold. And even perhaps keeping your eyes closed, sensing other bodies in the space, breathing, moving. And just somehow spending a moment just noticing a little of the outside coming into your body. And noticing how your body receives the outside, or how it is sensitive to sensations coming from the outside, like a receiver receiving the outside in through your sensory organs and also through your skin. And just somehow sensing how your body senses from the inside what lies outside of it. And from here, just bring your attention slowly back a little into your body, and perhaps your focus and your attention or awareness onto your lips. And just attune a little into the way that you feel your lips or you perceive your lips. They might be slightly opened, so you might feel the breath or the air flowing through your upper lip and the lower lip. But perhaps you could also try to see how it feels when both of your lips touch one another. Your upper lip and your lower lip. Feeling both how your upper and your lower lip touch one another and how they make contact with one another. Again, feeling those two surfaces touching one another. And with that also feeling the space between your lips, between your upper lip and your lower lip, and how these two are somewhat a meeting and a threshold at the same time. And then from here, slowly move your attention on to your eyelids as they are closed. And just feel how both your upper eyelid and your lower eyelid touch one another. And again, attune to that space between your upper eyelid and your lower eyelid. And just notice how they touch each other in a moment of contact and also in a moment of closure. Closing in the outside and allowing you to look inside. And then through that somehow notice how your body is kind of like in a moment of retouch. Like retouching itself. Touching itself from lip to lip and eyelid to eyelid. And just resting here in the space, perhaps we can attune to what these openings and closings, what these thresholds, like the spaces between our lips or the spaces between our eyelids, what they can teach us about our own limits and about our own boundaries, about the things that we allow in and the things that we allow out. And somehow reflecting on what we also can learn from these kinds of thresholds in our bodies and what they can teach us about the inside and outside of our own bodies, and also the insides and outsides of other bodies and the spaces in which we meet. And somehow from here also attuning to the sensation of how your body is itself a threshold, how it is both an opening and a closing, a surface that is both inside and outside. Here and gone, here and gone, here and gone, with an emphasis on the here in the here and gone.
Can we now please hand over to Matthias?
Thank you, Tavi and Murat. So what we've just done with Murat is actually a really nice way into what I'd like to share. And I'd like to basically share a choreographic material from my work and invite you to move with me through that material while I talk us through it. And the kind of thing that this choreographic material is it offers some parameters that create a kind of landscape for moving in. And the invitation is to journey through that landscape with your own experience. So that's sort of the kind of thing it is, or what I mean by a choreographic material. I'm going to invite you to kind of come in and find a space and just sort of start by sitting. And I think it might be fine to have some chairs in the space, but it might help to actually just sort of move the bean bags a little bit out. So floor space is helpful for this. So maybe we can just adjust, and feel free to just come in and sit, give yourself some space around you. Maybe just shove bean bags a little bit out. Thanks. That's great. Thank you. And it might be useful also, we're going to move around a little bit, so also like bags and things, a little bit useful to just put them a little further out of our way so we don't have to think about it. Thanks. So, and just while we're rearranging, I just want to say that I really invite you to engage with this in any way that you like. So I invite you to kind of be in the space and be moving. But equally, you're really welcome to also engage with this by witnessing, listening, sitting in a chair. And you might want to experiment with versions of this where you are, or just feel really free to do any of those things in any combination at any time. The name of this material, what I like to call it, is something that Murat referred to earlier. I like to call it back and forthing. And for reasons that will become obvious very soon. And this material comes from a work of mine called Know-How Generator. And that title, Know-How Generator, is spelled N-O-H-O-W. So know-how is spelled N-O-H-O-W in this title, as opposed to maybe that sounds more familiarly like K-N-O-W, H-O-W, which I'm starting to call know-how, because I'm more attuned to the other one, the N-O-H-O-W. So when I'm saying know-how, I'm thinking N-O-H-O-W. And I won't really go into the sort of thinking behind that title, but I'll just say that I'm drawing that term N-O-H-O-W, know-how, from Sarat Maharaj, and Sarat Maharaj, where I found it, was drawing it from Samuel Beckett. I guess a few really simple, probably obvious things to say, just practically. As we're moving, just please take care of yourself, and this is the kind of thing that really invites you to always adjust to whatever works for you, or whatever your needs are, whatever you're feeling as you're doing it. So please just keep listening to your own body and keep adapting however you want. And then also, I feel like it'll be fine for us to be moving in the space. We're not hundreds of people, but still just be a little bit aware of the space around you and the others that we are in the space with. And then, boring detail, but we'll be starting sitting, and sometimes I find it useful definitely to put my hands on the floor and stuff. There are bits of this floor in this room where there's some gaps here and there, so just tread a little bit attentively as you are on the floor, just so you don't get caught anywhere. And otherwise, I think we've made plenty of space for ourselves. I've tried to come up with a brief way to kind of introduce what this material is about for me. And what I'd like to do is just read these couple of sentences and then talk through it a little bit. So for me, this material, back and forthing, is about engaging with taking a reading of your felt sense experience as a way of finding something out. And this process of finding something out is a process of both magic and science at the same time. And it's both serious and not serious. So, taking a reading of your felt sense experience, what I find useful about the phrase taking a reading is that it can have associations with kind of taking a measurement, just noticing what's there, and through some kind of device, maybe a scientific kind of device, just taking a reading, taking a measure of what's there. At the same time, taking a reading can have associations with different forms of divination, like taking a reading of a palm, or taking a reading of tea leaves, or taking a reading of the stars. And it's taking a reading of your felt sense experience, so whatever you attune to when you think about what you might find felt sense experience to be in this moment, here and gone, and here and gone. And that nice phrase that Murat and Tavi are using from Deborah Hay. It's a way of finding something out, a way of setting in motion a process of perhaps generating some form of knowing, or NOHOW, know-how. And a process of magic and science. I like thinking about that phrase as one category rather than two, magic and science as one thing. And for me, that has some association with Abby Warburg. And what I am trying to draw from in having that phrase in the air has something to do with noticing the range of ways of knowing that are part of my embodied capacities, or that are part of the spectrum of human embodied capacities for knowing. So I think about the rational ways of knowing that I have within my capacities as maybe more scientific ways of knowing. And I think about the more than rational ways of knowing that I have within my bodily capacities as perhaps magical ways of knowing, which might be more felt ways of knowing or intuitive ways of knowing. And it's both serious and not serious. I really like this sentence from Deborah Hay that goes, I should say Deborah Hay is somebody whose work is very woven into my interests. So I'm really super delighted that Tavi and Murat have been referring to her words. The sentence that I'm thinking about from Deborah Hay right now is, I always retain the capacity to laugh at my own serious intentions, even while those intentions remain serious. And so I love this seriousness and not seriousness at the same time, and somehow that feels like a really important ingredient in making a kind of generativity possible in some way. And I like to try and give myself attempted reminders about that, and today I'm doing that with my voice, with this little echo with which I hope to talk through with you as we move through this serious and not serious material. So, Nikki, if we could please start everything. Just feel free to spread out and sit. And I'll get rid of this. And let's just start by, just make yourself comfortable sitting somehow. And we'll just really kind of go back to where we just were with Murat by just checking into our felt sense experience. And you might want to, once again, close your eyes briefly as we do this, whatever works for you. So just turning your attention toward taking a reading of your felt sense experience. So just an opportunity to tune in, as we've already done a few minutes ago, to just tune in to, as you scan your whole body, all your surfaces, all those thresholds that you were just paying attention to, the weight of your body, the interiors, the volumes of your body, and just noticing what's there and what comes forward in your attention. Where does your attention land in any given moment? What lights up as you scan your whole body, scanning all of your cells as sensors, doing sensing? So, trillions of cells, all of those trillions of cells doing sensing. And just noticing where your attention lands. And let's just call where your attention lands lightly for a moment. Just call that what lights up. And then something else, after a few moments, might draw your attention. You can call that what lights up. Just trusting wherever your attention lands for whatever reason. That can be what lights up for this moment. And what lights up might be a really small group of cells, might be somewhere really specific, just a small group of cells. Or it might be a really large group of cells, a really huge area where your attention goes, for whatever reason, in your felt sense experience. All your cells doing sensing. Loads to notice, but just what happens to come forward in your attention, what's foregrounded, or just where does your attention happen to land. And let's just start to work with what lights up. And maybe just allow what lights up just to lead you somewhere to kind of reconfigure how you're sitting. So just notice what lights up, and then what if what lights up just leads you to a little shift of somehow your arrangement of how you're sitting. And then just arrive in a slightly new structural arrangement of your structure and how you're sitting, and then just make yourself comfortable again and tune in again to notice what's lighting up in your awareness. And then once again, what if what lights up just leads you somewhere to a little change of maybe direction or change of posture, just some change of configuration, and make yourself comfortable again. Just this test of where does your attention land? What seems to light up in your awareness? And then allowing that to lead again and just shift you into a little bit of a different configuration, just a little move, and just noticing where does it feel like there's availability for what lights up to go? Or even where does what lights up feel like it might want to go? Is there a direction somehow in your noticing of your felt sense experience of what lights up? And just staying with that, just tuning into this way of working with what lights up, just leading you to shift how you're sitting. Each thing that lights up, just making a change. It leads somewhere or it sends you. And then making yourself comfortable and scanning again and noticing what lights up next. And what lights up might be on the surface, or it might be in the interior, or somehow both. It might even be more than one place if your attention goes there. And maybe what lights up can even be inclusive of your thought or your feeling. Maybe you can just allow yourself to lightly make a choice about where that thought or feeling might be located in all of your cells, and work with that as what lights up. And just making yourself comfortable each time to scan and check in. And part of the work can be on trying to expand your scan and to make it as open to scanning all of your trillions of cells as sensors as possible, even maybe places we tend to send our attention to less, maybe back surfaces or interior surfaces or folds or face or inside of the mouth. Just keep checking out, where is it that lights up? Where is it that your attention lands for one reason or another? And also, maybe this work can be a little bit on becoming more and more specific about noticing just those cells that you land on as what lights up. And what if just those cells can lead or send you, and the whole rest of your body can agree to make it possible just for those cells that are what lights up in this moment to be what sends or what leads, so that there's this kind of specific opportunity created by just those cells for the shift to happen, somehow that you might not have experienced before. And maybe keep changing your direction. And let's try now to just keep that inward direction of attention, even while we just gently open your eyes if they're not already open, and seeing if it's possible to keep a specific scanning of your felt sense experience from the direction inside of your body, even as you gently, softly allow your eyes to be open and allow your visual field to be included as part of your felt sense experience. Maybe trying first how that feels with your seeing being very near to the edges of your body in the space just around you. Is it possible to have an inward direction of attention and a slightly more outward direction of attention at the same time? And just let yourself shift each time and make yourself comfortable. What lights up? And then maybe with your seeing, what if it tries to include a space a little further away from you, a little mid-range in this room? What does that do to your experience of your scanning of your felt sense experience? Can you keep the inward direction and the outward direction at the same time? And even further, in the furthest distances in this room, can you keep a sense of landing with what lights up and just letting that shift? Just this checking out what it feels like to have an inward direction of attention and an outward direction of attention at the same time. Whatever lights up, that specific thing, what if that just leads you somewhere? So let's say that's part of it. That's working with perception. And now let's introduce working with momentum. So let's just start to work with, from a kind of sitting place, I'd suggest. I find it easier to start from sitting. Just gently shifting your weight back and forth, your whole weight, just shifting back and forth. Really nice and gently, taking your time. Just momentum shifting back and forth and back. So this weight is just kind of starting to be journeying. Weight is journeying. It's gently introducing momentum, maybe a really kind of mild degree of momentum. Nice and easy, and always being free to just shift and adjust and make yourself comfortable, even while the back and the forth just remains constant. So this state of back and forth thing remains constant, even though you might always shift a little bit, make yourself comfortable, and just getting used to this feeling of the shifting back and forth. I like to work with this image of my body almost like a bag full of water, or a bag with some water in it. A kind of thin and very malleable bag with some heavy water sloshing around the bottom of it. And just this sense of the weight of that water that sloshes back and forth, and this kind of looseness of the edges of my whole body as this weighty water just sloshes nice and easily back and forth. And with that weighty water sloshing back and forth, it kind of takes care of itself. It's almost like this feeling of a kind of perpetual motion where I don't have to work too hard because the water's just sloshing back and forth, nice and easy. Yeah, and as we keep sloshing, maybe we can come back to what lights up. So now, what if, as this back and forth thing continues, what if your back and forth thing might work with what lights up in your felt sense experience as a resource? So if I notice somewhere that's lighting up, maybe I let that lead my back and forth things. Maybe even if I notice another place that lights up, then maybe my back and my forth, where I'm going to and from in my back and my forth, can be going from one thing that lights up to another thing that lights up, in between, perhaps two things that light up. And as specific as possible, articulating your back and forth thing through this resource of the reading that you're taking of your felt sense experience. Back and forth thing between what lights up and another thing that lights up, and that can always shift and gradually change. And let's start to let this keep journeying, maybe upwards in space. So from this sitting place, maybe there's a way that this can become an evolving journey upwards in space toward standing. And it can be nice and gradual, but also there are some practical challenges in making this shift from being in a low space to standing. And just be kind to yourself and don't make yourself work too hard, even as you keep that attention to what lights up. Finding a way eventually to standing and this different state of your weight back and forthing, and allowing your back and forthing to be articulated by what lights up. And I always retain the capacity to laugh at my own serious intentions, even while those intentions remain serious. And checking in with your seeing of the near distance, and the far distance, and the mid-range distance. Part of the work is on really including what you find in your reading of your felt sense experience, and finding a way to make room within your back and forthing, within the form of your back and forthing, to be articulated by what you're noticing in your felt sense experience. This kind of honoring of what you're noticing in your felt sense experience, and working to make room somehow within this more and more articulated back and forth thing to accommodate what you're reading. And let's start to just gradually let this start to journey through space. So kind of going along some winding pathway in any direction. Very incrementally maybe traveling. Just setting in motion where this can take you in space. The weight back and forthing, and very incrementally, tiny bit at a time, little adjustments, almost doing nothing to travel in space, but just letting that take you ahead, along, and how that changes where you are in this environment, and what you get to perceive where you are, what you come into contact with in your felt sense reading, and what there is the opportunity to set in motion a little more. So if something in your felt sense reading feels kind of fixed or static or frozen, is there maybe some kind of opportunity to just allow that to set in motion? And more articulated. And always adjusting. And what if your felt sense reading can be a reading of the whole internal environment, the whole environment around you, all the layers of it, including the relational layers of it, including the relational layers of what it feels like to be in this environment. And what if it might be possible just to open up room in the articulation of your back and forthing, to just be articulated by what you're reading in your felt sense experience, what you're reading in the feedback from all of your cells doing sensing, doing knowing, what all of your cells are sensing, doing knowing, setting in motion what might be fixed. Is it even possible to set in motion a little bit your perception of the whole room that you're back and forthing in? What if the room can become just a little bit less statically fixed? What if this back and forthing of your weight can, in your experience, just slightly set in motion some possibility for mobilizing something that was fixed before, opening up this possibility somehow to open up some kind of roots that weren't quite there before, some roots of possibility, some ways, directions of possibility that weren't quite so present before. It's just a kind of shifting back and forth, something very simple, but also what if it can be this way of knowing, somehow this know-how generator? Let's just start to journey downwards in space, finding your way gradually with this journey back down to the ground, carrying with you whatever resonates, whatever perceptions, readings, appetites are present, noticing those appetites, noticing those curiosities, whatever they are. Just find your way down to sitting, landing somewhere, and just rocking back and forth. And still checking out what's resonating with you in the room, checking out where your attention goes, appetites, what's settling or what's scratching, what's an opening sense or what's a closing sense. And then just let your back and forthing just subside a little bit. And also noticing your felt sense reading of what happens as you bring this to a close, as you maybe transition from one kind of attention to another kind of attention, or from one mode of engaging with other people to a different or more sociable or verbal mode of engaging with other people, just whatever there is to notice as you shift. And how it might be possible just to let that resonate. Thank you. We can just fade out the sound, please. Thanks. And then I just wanted to put that one slide up, please, so I can thank some people. So I wanted to mention that my collaborating performer in this work, who couldn't be here today, sadly, is Katie Ko, and my collaborators Jackie Shemesh and Joel Cohen, and Victoria Ford, and my producer Iris Chan, and that some funders helped make this work in its performance version. And I think we're going to just stay where we are, if you want to, and we're going to have a chat with Murat and Tavi and Georgia.
So, Georgia and Tavi, if you just gather around Matthias. So, we just wanted to take this moment, since this is the first time that the four of us are presently together in the space, to maybe just take a moment for each of us to share something with the room, and yeah, just share something with the room. It can really be anything. It can be imminent to the situation. It can come out of the situation. It can be something personal, can be something political, like whatever it is, just sharing something with the room. And I will pass the microphone on and I will begin. I'll just start and I'll pass it on. So I just, first of all, wanted to say thank you to all of you, to you, Matthias and Georgia and Tavi, and also Starhawk. We will be witnessing shortly to co-creating the space, and also everyone here present to co-presencing for your co-presences here together with us. And I would like to share a quote by Gayatri Spivak, and it is, "If one really thinks about the body as such, there is no possible outline of the body as such." Thank you.
I have two things that are coming to my mind to say, at least. One of them is, I forgot to say thanks to Nikki and Patrick and the technical team here for supporting me with that. Thank you. And the other thing is that when you mentioned this quote before, what came to my mind is a quote that I like, that I think is related to that, from Guy Claxton, who is a cognitive scientist, basically, who's somebody that I found interesting for a long time. And he has a quote that goes, "The body isn't a thing, it's an event." So there's this interesting perspective from his perspective as a cognitive scientist, the body as an event. And he also describes it. He also describes the body as a body-mind context constellation, always welling up. It's not a very exact quote, but it's the gist of it is there.
Couple of things, I guess. One is, as I was just being in this space, I kept feeling, not just with the four of us, but just everybody here, like this kind of familiarity somehow, like already having known each other, even though we're all probably meeting. I mean, I don't know about amongst you all, but that. And then some of the last two quotes, kind of, this image that comes to mind is like, I think it's the right name. Is it Klein bottle? Like the bottle that opens onto itself? Anyone know what I'm talking about? It's like, it's kind of like along with the Mobius strip, these sort of things that are sort of like puzzles, right? Like where are they actually opening up onto? So yeah, sorry, I should have actually had a more concrete like reference, but I think it's called Klein's bottle or Klein bottle. Anyhow, yeah. Okay, can we now please hand over to Starhawk?
Hello, everybody. My name is Starhawk, and I am delighted to be here at this gathering, even in a sort of virtual form. I'm currently teaching permaculture out here on the west coast of British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And I want to acknowledge that this is the land of the Cowichan peoples and the Malahat peoples. And I feel very honored to be here as a guest and to have a chance, hopefully, to contribute something to the care of the land, which the indigenous people have been doing here for tens of thousands of years. Happy to be with you all and to be asked to do something on this interesting topic, which honestly I hadn't thought a lot about before I was invited to do this, whatever it is going to be, on camouflage. But as I thought about it, and I think about camouflage and all the different ways we camouflage ourselves, all the ways that camouflage works in nature, it struck me that the most important thing is to know who we are without camouflage. And then we can explore the different ways that we do camouflage ourselves. So I'd like to lead you on a little meditation journey now, exploring the idea of camouflage. I invite you to take a moment and kind of settle yourself, get comfortable, ground yourself. You might take a moment and acknowledge who the original peoples are of the land that you're on. Those of us on the West Coast out here have made this a practice as a way of acknowledging the history of colonization that we inherit, and our intention to do work around healing and repairing some of that damage. For those of you who might be in England or in Europe doing this, it's interesting to look back on the histories of colonization and immigration and movements that have happened to the peoples there, and to think back, all of us have indigenous ancestors. They were all indigenous to somewhere, somehow, sometime. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And I think we often forget that in our disconnected world. So taking a breath, settling in, maybe feel your feet on the ground. And you can close your eyes if you want to. Take some deep breaths into your belly. As you inhale, just feel yourself settling in to that force of gravity. Gravity, which is really the Earth's way of hugging us close and telling us she loves us and doesn't want us to fly off into outer space. Notice how your body is settling, dancing with gravity. As you take a breath, maybe imagine yourself like a tree rooted in the earth. And you can feel those roots go down through the base of your spine, down through your legs and feet, all the way down through layers of soil and mud and rock. Feeling the waters that are held under the earth, and down to that core of fire at the very center of the earth. As you feel that fire that's still hot from the earth's formation, take a breath. Anything you want to release, let go of, just breathing in and just let it go. Down into that fire. And now take a deep breath and draw some of that fire up. Up into the base of your spine, your belly. Breathing deep, inhaling deep, feeling your spine growing up like a flexible tree trunk, pushing up out the top of your head like branches. Feel them reach up and out and down and touching the earth again. And feeling the sunlight, or maybe where you are, it's moonlight, starlight, that sky energy. Take a deep breath and draw it in, down through the top of your head. And down through your heart, your hands, and your belly, all the way down through your legs and feet, down into the earth. And just take a moment, feel that flow of energy up you. What we call grounded. You have an energetic connection to the earth. And let's bring ourselves now into our physical senses, just taking a moment, again, feeling how your body is dancing with gravity. Taking a deep sniff in and out. Notice what you smell around you. And what you taste. Opening your ears and noticing what you hear. Opening your eyes and noticing what you see. Now that you're grounded, I'd like you to take a moment and think about who you are when you are really just yourself, your truest self. When you don't have to camouflage yourself, you don't have to hide, you don't have to impress anyone, where you can be in touch with all of your power and energy, but not having to put it out and display it. And maybe there's a place or situation where you feel, at home, comfortable, you can truly be yourself. Maybe think about that for a moment. Think about how you feel there. Maybe there are certain people that bring that out with you. And see if you can find an image, something you can hold in your mind, a symbol, to symbolize this state of being grounded and being in your core self. And see if there's a place in your body you can touch, or maybe it's a way you sit or stand, breathe, something physical that you can do that puts you into the state of being at your core self. And use these two things together, the physical thing, the thing you visualize. And now see if there is a word or a phrase. It might be your own name. It might be a sound. It could be a melody, like a snatch of a song, but something you can hear in your ear that you can put together with this physical thing and with the thing you visualize. True to yourself. Take a moment and just let yourself feel how it is to be in that state. And remember these three things because we're going to use them throughout this meditation. And now take some deep breaths in and out. And I'd like you to think about camouflage. One of the ways that it works in nature is that things camouflage themselves in order to hide, in order to be safe, in order to confuse predators so they can't be found. An insect evolves to look like a leaf. A chameleon evolves the ability to change the color of its skin to match the background. I'd like you to take Are there parts of yourself that you hide? As you take a deep breath, what kind of camouflage do you put on when you can't be safe and be yourself? Can you imagine it as a second skin, or as a garment, as a film, a bubble, something you put over yourself? Are there things you pretend to be or not to be? Are there parts of yourself you keep hidden, even from yourself? As you breathe deep, as you feel yourself in that second skin, what happens to your body when you adopt that camouflage? Does your breathing change? Does your posture change? You're starting to feel tension in certain places, certain muscles? What happens to your energy? Does it take energy to maintain the camouflage? Is it sucking energy from something else you might have done or you might be? What emotions are you feeling when you're in this other skin? What thoughts go through your mind? Is there an inner dialogue? What does the world look like to you when you're in this camouflage? How much of the world can you take in? Where's your focus? And what kinds of choices do you see that you have? As you take a deep breath now, release, let it go, and use that anchor back to your core self, that place you touch, that thing that you visualize, that word or phrase that you say. And notice what shifts as you come back into being just who you are, uncamouflaged, comfortable, safe. What shifts in your body? You might find yourself consciously stretching, releasing something. And what shifts in your energy, in your emotions? You perceive the world outside you and around you. And this meditation is not to judge a camouflage. Sometimes they're necessary, sometimes they're life preserving. It's just to develop an awareness of when we are in that camouflage, that second skin, and when we are not, and what it costs us to maintain the camouflage. Take a breath now. As you breathe, I'd like you to think about another way that nature uses camouflage. Some things camouflage themselves to look like other things that are more dangerous or more powerful. The swallowtail butterfly evolves to look like the monarch, which is poisonous, in the hopes that other things won't eat it and it won't have to make that investment in creating that poison itself. As you take a breath now, I'd like you to think about whether there are places in your life where you adopt that kind of camouflage. Are there places where you need to look more powerful or more dangerous than you really are? Where, in order to avoid looking weak or vulnerable, you have to present yourself as looking strong and powerful? Are there places where you feel like you are pretending to be something you really aren't quite? Just take a breath, and again, imagine that camouflage as another skin, as a garment, something you put on. Maybe it is a garment. Maybe you dress up in your business clothes and become somebody else. Maybe it's an armor. Take a breath and notice what happens to your body when you adopt that skin, when you adopt that camouflage. What happens to your breathing, their tension? What happens to your energy? Do you feel energized? Do you feel exhausted? Does it take energy to maintain the camouflage? What emotions are you feeling when you're wearing that armor, when you're in that skin? And is there an inner dialogue? Are there thoughts that go through your mind, a story that you're telling yourself? What does the world look like to you when you're in that camouflage? Where's your focus? What can you take in from the outside world? And now take a breath, let that go. Use that anchor, bring yourself back to that core self, that place you touch, that word or phrase you say, that thing you visualize. And notice what changes, what shifts. How does your body feel? Your energy, your emotions, your focus. What changes when you come back to that place where you can just be yourself, uncamouflaged, at home, comfortable. No less powerful, but not needing to display it, put it out there. And again, it's not a judgment. Sometimes that other kind of camouflage is necessary or useful. But it's good to be able to have that awareness of it, to know when we're in it and when we're not in it, to know what it costs us energetically to maintain it. And take a breath. You've done really well so far. We're going to move on to Magical Camouflage 2.0. And this time I'd like you to think about a situation where you might actually need a camouflage, or we sometimes call it a glamour. You know, maybe you're about to go into your city council meeting and make a speech, and you tend to be a little afraid of talking in front of people, and you want to look knowledgeable. Maybe you're a teacher, you're going into a new classroom, and you want to have that aura of confidence and authority. Maybe you're an actor reading for a part. I'd like you to think about if there's a place or a time in your life where a kind of glamour might come in useful or handy, and what that might be. And now, in your imagination, I'd like you to create a garment. It might be a magic cloak you can put on, or it might be a whole costume. It could be a suit of armor, something you can consciously put on. And just take a moment and think about how you might decorate it, whether there are symbols. And sometimes it might be more a cloak of invisibility. We always say in magic, invisibility is not so much about not being able to be seen, it's about not being noticed. There may be those moments you just don't want to be noticed. You don't want to stand out. I often think about that when I have to cross an international border, for example. Right? Think about what that garment might look like, and let's just take a breath and consciously put it on. As you do, notice again what changes in your body. What changes in your energy? What emotions do you feel? Are there thoughts that go through your head, or is there an affirmation you can create to go with this? Knowing that you're wearing this cloak, what does the world look like to you? And can you find a way to allow yourself to be open, take in information? And now that you have this magic cloak, garment, know that you can also take it off. So let's take a breath, and now let's take it off. And notice what shifts and changes. Use that anchor, bring yourself back. Taking some deep breaths in and out. And once again, feeling what it's like to be grounded, connected to the earth. Think about that thing you visualize, that place you touch, that word or phrase that you say. And what shifts when you come back to being in your core self, being just who you are. And knowing that who you are is enough. That it's making a unique contribution to the world that only you can make. So that's our camouflage meditation. And I encourage you to use that anchor to core self, that word or phrase you say, that place you visualize, and that physical thing you do. The more you use that, the more it becomes kind of your default to go there. And I find it extremely useful in many situations. I've taught activists how to go into dangerous situations, and using that anchor can help you stay grounded when everything's blowing apart around you. It's also a great one to use when people are projecting all kinds of things on you. I imagine a lot of you watching this may be artists, performers, creative people, people who put very vulnerable parts of yourself out into the public. And it can be kind of hard to do that. People respond to it and they often personalize it. Sometimes they attack you unreasonably. Sometimes they, like admire you unreasonably. And keeping it in that anchor can just help you keep steady in the middle of all of that. And then having that conscious garment of camouflage can be a way that you can sort of take control of the situation, not have to unconsciously camouflage yourself, but know when you're doing it and have a way to bring yourself back. So even when you have to go out there in the world and be someone, you can come back home and you can bring yourself back to being just who you are. So I hope this was interesting, useful, illuminating, and I really appreciate the opportunity for being invited to be part of this amazing and wonderful gathering of creative people. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who's done all the work to make this happen. All those people behind the scenes doing the technology and all the organizing and the unglamorous parts, and to all of you who are presenting and being part of this. And I hope at some future time we can do this in person and not just in the strange virtual form. But I am grateful for the technology that lets us do this and has let us stay connected through these last few years. All right. Well, blessed be and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone, for coming and joining. This is the end of our session.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're going to be playing a soundtrack, and so feel free to kind of ground yourselves again and then leave as you feel, you know, the right moment for you. But this is us wrapping up here, right?
Yeah, so the track is going to be about 15 minutes, so feel free to chill and just hang out here for a while. You don't have to leave right away, but we're opening the doors, and you can just, yeah. Thank you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You make me feel so bad. I don't know why you do it to me, because I love you so. Don't mean me no good. Don't want nobody that don't care for my feelings. Don't want nobody want me at all. I don't want nobody. I can't take it anymore. I don't want nobody. You just don't want me no more at all. I don't want nobody. Ooh, what a way to end another path. I don't want nobody. Baby, I ain't gonna let you mistreat me no more. I don't want nobody. My baby, fine. I don't want nobody. I'm tired of sleepless nights thinking about you. I don't want nobody. I'm just gonna repeat it to you. One hotel.